What is up, failroaders? This is going to be a pretty serious conversation, and I might as well go ahead and say that. Hold up a second. Boom! Alright. Had to make sure I muted my other computer so I didn't start hearing feedback. This is going to be a serious conversation here because we're talking about death and Final Fantasy VII. So it goes without saying, massive spoilers ahead. Yeah. So the name of this episode is Death Will Come for Them. This is final. Oh, don't know if you guys heard that. Nope. Go away. Postpone. All right. This is, the poster for the video said Final Destination. In those movies, yeah, the characters cheated death and death came for them. And in Final Fantasy VII Remake, the characters, well, you could say they cheated death because a few characters are still alive at the end of Remake who shouldn't be. And that's setting the stage for how we should expect things to go in Part 2. So now I'm going to start this off. First thing I'm going to show you guys is I call it the death reel. It is the reel of every death that we see in FF7R that happens during the game, not like in a flashback. So here we go. Let me know if you guys can hear this because I can't hear it on my end. So yeah, that's every single death that happens in Final Fantasy VII Remake. If I left one out, looks like my picture's frozen. Not sure. So hopefully everyone can still hear me. Anyway, if I left one out, let me know if you didn't see main character's death in there. Once again, if the death happened in a flashback, such as Aerith's mother, then I'm not counting that. But let's continue on. Let me see if I can get this camera fixed. Let's see, just gonna switch. This looks weird. Transition, okay. I have no idea what's going on there. Let me see if I can switch back so you guys can get a big view of all the goods. And no, it's still, that's crazy. That's so weird. I don't know why that's happening. All right. All right, so I guess we're stuck with this for now. So let's start talking about why the creators decided to change up how people died in the remake, and a lot of people didn't like it. I can consider myself to be one of them because to us, especially the Sector 7 plate collapse, it felt like they were thwarting death, and Final Fantasy VII was all about steering into death and having to deal with the consequences of death, having to deal with the consequences of your actions. But after getting to see the remake and listen to lots of other theory crafters and just have time to think about it, I've come to the realization that they're not just trying to remake Final Fantasy VII, they're trying to remake the feelings that we felt way back when we first played Final Fantasy VII. And what I mean is, oh yeah, you can feel nostalgic, but they don't just want you to feel nostalgia. They want you to feel the emotions that you felt back then as though you were feeling them for the first time again. That's a pretty big leap. That is number one. I think they did a great job on Remake Part 1, and most people who are remaking something, they might change it up a little bit, but they would be happy if people were just happy with it. But these guys are going a step further in trying to get us to feel the feelings that we felt as though we were feeling them for the first time in this remake. And while they may have thwarted death in Part 1, death's coming for them. And the reason they decided to change how these characters died is so that we will get to feel that shock and that awe like we did in the original again. We're going to feel our hearts skip a beat as one of our favorite or beloved characters dies in some new and unexpected turn of events. So let's talk quickly about the characters who should be dead but aren't dead. Those characters include, first off, Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge, or at least they didn't die in the way that they were expected to. There's lots of theories out there as to whether Jessie is alive. We see her gloves on the side table next to Biggs, who is clearly alive. He wakes up at the end of Part 1. But how did Jessie's gloves get there? A lot of people want to believe that she is dead, myself included, because she was a well-loved character in Part 1. At least I fell in love with her. I thought she was awesome. But those gloves being there, they could mean that she's alive too. Let's see, Biggs survived. We find that at the end. Wedge, we found out early on that he was still alive. There's a whole chapter on rescuing him. And then he returns towards the end, I want to say in chapter 17, towards the end of chapter 17, yeah. And his ending is kind of mysterious because they don't show him actually dying. What happens is the Whispers surround him. He's trying to struggle against them, and then he kind of disappears into the Whispers. We hear the sound of breaking glass, and then we hear, just a few of his, what we can consider to be his final thoughts, his inner thoughts, as maybe he dies. We're led to assume that the Whispers push him through the glass on one of the upper floors of the Shinra building to his death, but we didn't see it happen. So what do you guys think? Did Wedge die there, or is Wedge still alive and they wanted to feign his death again? Well, that would be for the second time in Remake Part 1, so that there can be some kind of great reveal later that he's still alive. I'm kind of torn, because when a game doesn't show you directly someone's death, like fading to black, hearing some glass shatter, and then hearing these mournful words, that could all just be just throwing us for a loop. But I don't know. I feel like he's dead. I don't think they're going to fake his death during the plate collapse and then fake his death again at the end of this video game. So moving on, though, also having to do with the very end of part 1, we see that by Aerith, Cloud, and the others battling and defeating Destiny, that not only are they changing present events, but they're also changing past events, or at least a past event that is happening in an alternate timeline. So we've got, the Beagle verse and the Terrier verse. Where Zack survives, we clearly see that Stamp, the dog, is a terrier on a bag of chips, whereas in Remake Part 1, he's always been a beagle. So Zack surviving to the end, or surviving when he should have been killed at that point. Once again, major spoiler alerts. What does that, how is this going to change things? And then, who dies? If Zack lives, then who dies? Death is going to come for someone. Someone's going to take Zack's place. Now, since we're dealing with the possibility of 2 alternate timelines, is Cloud going to die in this timeline? Is that how they're going to be able to justify Zack surviving and possibly these 2 timelines merging either sometime in the middle or at the end of part 2? But also, with Zack surviving and taking Cloud back to Midgar, how does this change events in basically what would take place in Final Fantasy VII Remake in the Terrierverse? So let's go to the plate collapse. At the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, when we see Marl and some other Sector 7 residents taking the sign of 7th Heaven and leaning it up against a wall, in the background, up there, way in the background, you can tell which plates you're seeing because you've got the Sector 6 plate, which still has some scaffolding or some framework that represents that collapsed expressway that they were still in the middle of rebuilding. And beyond that, you see the Sector 7 plate still standing. So what's going on? Was that just... let me know what you think. Was that just a design error? Was it one of those things where they had created the backdrop for this particular scene, and then someone came in and said, hey, why is Sector 7 still there? Oh, dang, I thought this was a backdrop that had Sector 7 in it. That was the notes I was given. Oh, no, Sector 7 plate should have been collapsed in this scene. Or was this entirely purposeful? Does Zack surviving mean that the Sector 7 plate in the Terrierverse doesn't collapse? Does that mean that Biggs that we see laying in the bed in the orphanage is also in the Terrierverse? Because we see, this golden aura, this yellow aura, float down over the city right after the explosion that knocks Zack back. And we see this one little yellow orb of light enter Biggs's chest. So that could lead us to believe that Zack surviving, Biggs surviving, and the residents placing the sign against the wall could all be happening in the Terrierverse. What is going on here? My video disappeared. Let's see what happens. I'm still frozen on the other one. Okay, whatever. I'll be frozen for a few minutes and we'll reset. We'll see how things go. That way you guys can at least watch something more interesting than just me talking. Anyway, so if the Sector 7 plate doesn't collapse because Zack is alive, what does transpire that causes Biggs to become injured? And if the plate doesn't collapse, is there still a big battle at the pillar? Does Zack being there or being involved cause one party or the other to win against the other? So Zack isn't necessarily going to be one of the good guys, or at least he may not consider Avalanche to be the good guys, even though they're fighting against Shinra. It's definitely... we could what if this to death. I'm going to try switching back again. Alright, video's back. That's so weird. So, why is Biggs in that bed at the orphanage? Why are Jesse's gloves there? And what verse are we in? Once again, we can what if this to death, but I'm going to go out on a limb there and say that Biggs is alive in the Terrier verse, which means that if the plate didn't collapse, then perhaps Jesse could still be alive too. Maybe even Wedge, or maybe Wedge was someone whose life was lost at the pillar battle. Also, if Zack is alive, is the pillar battle or some other huge conflict where some other important characters die, like the main party members. After all, I see this happening where the two timelines merge somehow, or maybe they've already merged at the end of part 1, and that's what we're seeing. I think that would make it a little bit more convoluted, but in order for the two parts to have merged, then the characters Barrett, Tifa, Aerith, and Red 13 would have to have died in Zack's timeline. Otherwise, there would be duplicates of them if that is what happened. So we see also at the end of Intergrade, Zack flings open the doors to the church and is like, Aerith, I'm back. And Aerith's nowhere to be found, and there's just tons of sad people sitting in the church. There's also something that I need to investigate further, and I need to look through the footage at the end in order to see it, but we see someone's boots in the foreground with Zack in the background when he's framed by the door. And those boots kind of look like the boots of a soldier uniform. Who are we seeing? That's a question I don't know if anyone else has raised, and maybe I'm looking a little too far into it. Maybe, once again, I've got to analyze that footage to properly see whether that is indeed a soldier uniform, and if so, is it Cloud? What's going on? A lot of people are theorizing that Zack is still dead and that the church scene proves it. I think that the church scene actually disproves it, and we'll go into that really quickly. I think Zack's alive. The framing of him in the church scene at the end of intermission kind of mirrors the framing of him and Aerith at the end of Advent Children, when, yeah, they're definitely dead. So a lot of people are theorizing, hey, look, there's this juxtaposition between Advent Children and Intermission, where Zack is framed in this glowing, in this just white light, in the doorway of the church. The only thing I would say to that is, in the scene right before that, we see Zack on the outside of the church, and it's very clearly lit. So I don't think that him entering the church from this white light is him being dead, or proving that he's walking in or out of death. I think that's just something, that's an aesthetic that they gave to the game itself. You know, when you go from indoors to outdoors, there is this blinding light, and when the camera moves out with the character, the light adjusts, and then you're able to, focus on the intense amount of light outdoors. But so yeah, that scene, I don't think it proves that Zack is dead, or that we're seeing some kind of live stream event going on. But once again, these are all theories here. We're all just speculating. So I could be just as wrong as the next person, or maybe, fingers crossed, I want to be right. But we'll only find out maybe at the end of 2022 or at the beginning of 2023. So yeah, Zack surviving in the Terrier timeline is going to set into motion a ton of different events. And maybe things will still sort of play out, like Cloud's gonna meet Tifa, but Zack's gonna be there too. Clearly, we don't see Cloud with Zack when he goes to the church to visit Aerith at the end of intermission. So where's Cloud at that point? I maybe he's with Tifa, maybe Zack, maybe Cloud regained enough consciousness to be able to tell him, hey Zack, Tifa, maybe I can find her at in Midgar. I don't know if Cloud absolutely knows that she's in Midgar at this time, because it has been 5 years, but somehow he ends up in Tifa's care anyway. So maybe similar events transpire to lead him to the area where Tifa finds him. Zack surviving also means that Cloud doesn't have the opportunity to essentially assimilate Zack, which means that his character is probably going to be very different, and this could lead to him not gaining the strength that he believes that he has, which also could lead to, once again, his death in the Terrierverse. So I think we've gone over how Zack is going to alter the timeline enough. Let's go into, okay, all these characters, we're going to assume that Biggs and Jesse are alive. Whether it be, doesn't matter what verse they're in, let's talk about how they're going to die. Because once again, death is coming for them. So how are Biggs and possibly Jesse going to die in Remake Part 2? I believe that they will die in Part 2. I don't think they're going to survive all the way to the end. Big theory crafting. But if I were the game developer, it depends on how far they're going to make it in Part 2. I theorized in the beginning that they were going to make it all the way to Nibelheim. It would make sense for them to make it to Nibelheim, but that was also assuming that the game was going to come out in 2022. With it coming out in possibly 2023, I feel like that extra time of development, also with it being on the PlayStation 5 and possibly using Unreal Engine 5, I feel like they could potentially go further. I have a video that has to do with theorizing how far Part 2 is going to go, and that had to do with me believing that it was going to be a 4-part video game series, or possibly a 3-parter. But if they go further than Nibelheim, could the next logical place be the Temple of the Ancients? Could it be going all the way to a certain event that I'm going to talk about later? I don't know. But I don't see Biggs surviving all the way to the end. In this extended Final Fantasy VII universe, we know that there's more to Avalanche than just Barrett's cell. We know that they're a much bigger organization in the remake, and something involving Avalanche is going to be what gets Biggs killed. A lot of people are theorizing that maybe he becomes the leader of Avalanche. It could be that his mission causes him to butt heads with the main party members. It could be that he views the plate collapse as going too far, and this near-death experience changes him, and he decides, you know what, Barrett's out of control, I gotta stop him. But it's difficult to say when Biggs is going to die unless we can theorize when the end of part 2 is going to take place. Nibelheim, if that's the ending, I'm going to guess that Biggs is going to die at the Mount Corel reactor. I feel like it's just kind of some kind of poetic thing because they've been blowing up these reactors in Midgar, and all of this, all of the trouble that was caused to them revolves around the reactors. Let me switch reels here again. So the video is not looping. I think that's what is happening. The video is not looping like it's supposed to. Let me switch back. Oh, there's Marlene. So cute. Oops, didn't transition. So, where was I? The Mount Coral reactor. We already know that they're expanding heavily on every little aspect of the game. So we can assume that the Mount Coral reactor, where we really just passed through it, stopped there, maybe had a line or two of dialogue, if I'm not mistaken, and then we left it, and that's it. And we come back to it later on in the game to get some big materia. I think they're looking for big materia at that point, but bigger events are going to happen at Mount Corel in Remake Part 2. Potential place for Biggs to die, because once again it involves a reactor. If Shinra's regaining interest in all these different reactors, Avalanche is going to have some interest in them too. Then I'm guessing if we go further into the game, or to the end of Remake Part 2, if we go to, say, the Temple of the Ancients, or the Northern Continent, where things happen, then perhaps Nibelheim could be where Biggs meets his end. Don't ask me how, because, I mean, a ton of stuff is going to happen in Nibelheim anyway. We're going to pick up Vincent. They've already confirmed that Vincent is sleeping in the Shinra mansion in Nibelheim. We're going to have an encounter with Sephiroth there. Shit's going to happen in Nibelheim. So possibly this is going to be one of those areas where we're going to have some kind of pivotal moment happen. Not only that, though, we also have to have that shock and awe around this time, I think, where things start to go downhill for the characters. Maybe it won't happen there. Maybe that's too early if they make it all the way to the Northern Continent. But if it doesn't happen there, then perhaps it's got to happen somewhere around the 75% mark of the Part 2. Essentially what I'm saying is that Part 1 had the plate collapse. Part 2 has to have something equal happen, where there is death and destruction and the heroes fail at something. They are beaten back by the enemy, or the enemy is starting to gain a foothold. They succeed at something that our allies and our party members fail at. Jessie. If Jessie's alive, Jessie's going to be with Biggs. And I feel like her death, they once again, they want us to feel the feelings. They want us to experience the surprises and the shocks and the heartbreak all over again. So could they die together? Could Biggs and Jesse die in a similar fashion where, hey, you run into Biggs, and he dies, and then you run into Jesse and she dies? Or is this alternate timeline going to be so alternate that we don't see Jesse until we go to the Gold Saucer and she's the princess? She's the princess in the play that she always dreamt about being. She's the leading role. She's an actress, never joins Avalanche. Even if that happens, if we meet her that way, death's gonna find her as well. If she is not dead, if she didn't die in the plate collapse, or if she is somehow alive in the Terrierverse, death's gonna come for her, no matter how we meet her or how she's involved in part 2. All right, yeah, we're to that point. It's time to talk about the big one. Pardon me for dramatic pause. Aerith. I want her to be in all 3 games. At this point, earlier this year, I thought it was going to be a 4-game series. I'm leaning more now towards a 3-game series. Me being a huge fan of Aerith and Clarith for that matter, leave a comment below if you're Clarith or Claudie or whatever you may be, and also answer this question: if Cloud and Aerith equal Clarith, then why doesn't Cloud and Tifa equal Clefa? Just if someone could explain that to me, please, that would be great. Shouldn't it be Clefa, not Claudie? That sounds weird. But anyway, I digress. So I think Aerith has to die. But they, once again, going with this theme of not just nostalgia, but feeling. Wanting us to feel the pain that we felt way back when we played the original. If they kill her off in the exact same way, which can't possibly happen now that they have altered destiny, we wouldn't feel the same way as we did when the first time we ever saw it. So how can they make us feel that same heartache that we felt the first time we ever saw Aerith die? They're going to change it up on us. And I don't know, I don't even want to talk about it. I don't know that I see her making it to Remake Part 3, whenever that may be. Man, I could see it, but I could see if they have her death happen earlier, say like at the Temple of the Ancients or something, how shocking would that be? Because once again, just like in the original, we won't be expecting it. We're going to be thinking, oh, hey, there's Aerith. We get more time with the... No. That kind of feeling. That's what they want to go for. But also, I could see us making it all the way to, what's it called? The Cetra village, where she goes down into that sort of cathedral to pray for holy. What if we make it that far? What if we make it that far and we're all, the party's going up to meet her and we're playing as Cloud, and Cloud goes up to her and we're all sitting there waiting in anticipation for Sephiroth to leap down from above and skewer her? Would we not also feel the same sense of awe if that didn't happen. Oh my God. We make it this far and Aerith is still alive. Now, for new players, it doesn't matter. If they have not played the OG, then it doesn't matter to them. So they've already succeeded. They will have already succeeded in creating this shock and heartbreak and sad moments for new players. But they're not just trying to do that for the new players, they're trying to do that for the original players as well. And that's incredible. They're trying to get us to feel those feelings again. So whether she dies before or after how she died in the original, we're going to get this feeling in our gut, especially if she survives past the point that she did in the OG. If she survives that long, we're going to get this knot in our stomach, and we're going to say, oh my God, if she survived, then who's going to take her place? Or oh my God, is she going to survive to the end? No, wait. Is she going to die later? What's going to happen? We're going to have that uneasy feeling in playing. We're going to have this just what if moment, and it's going to continue on and on. And then what's going to happen is right when we feel like we can relax, maybe it's beyond the Icicle Inn, maybe it's when we go to the Northern Crater for the first time, maybe Aerith makes it all the way to there, maybe Tifa takes her place. We can once again what if this to death. I don't think Barrett's going to die. I don't think they're going to get rid of him. I think he's way too popular of a character. I mean, I love him. They did such a great job on him in the remake. But everyone seems to theorize that if it's not Aerith, then it'll be Tifa. Because while Aerith breaks Cloud out of his shell and represents this new relationship for him, Tifa, on the other hand, is his rock, his solid ground. Anytime he begins to falter, Tifa's there to pick him up. Tifa's there to rescue him. She does it on several occasions in Remake Part 1, which I think is some foreshadowing. It's foreshadowing for one of two things. Either that Tifa is meant to be with Cloud. I'm sorry, guys, I'm still a Clarith fan. Or it's foreshadowing that Tifa is once again his rock, his savior. And if she dies, how does that affect Cloud? If she dies, then there's no one left to catch him when he's about to fall. There's no one left to piece him back together because she knows his childhood. The rest of her town burnt to the ground. It's what happens then. I don't want it to happen, but I don't want Aerith to die either. I don't know. Okay, guys, this is going to be the last thing we talk about in this episode that's all about death, and this is going to be who dies at the end of Part 2. Okay, so this comes from a writing standpoint. I made a video a couple months ago stating that Midgar Part 1 of the remake is 25% of the original game. You guys should definitely check that out. It goes over a ton of evidence that suggests that Midgar in the original game takes up 25% of the storyline of the game. And is actually longer than a lot of people suggest. I'll leave it at that. You guys should take a look at that one. And once the live stream's over with and YouTube has had time to process it, I'll be sure to put a link to that at the end of the video and also in the description section if I can remember to do it. Leave a comment who you think is going to die in part 2. Let me do that before I get onto this. And also, if you've enjoyed this video, I definitely plan on doing more videos involving Final Fantasy VII, whether they be theory crafting live streams. I've got a couple in mind that I really can't live stream because I want to show specific clips at specific times, so I might just have to upload like a short 10-minute video. But if you are enjoying my content and you check out more of the content that I have on Final Fantasy VII, I hope you'll consider subscribing as well. But with that said, if they made it to the 25% mark of the overall story in Remake Part 1, that represents a break into Act 2 when it comes to writing stories. The 25% mark is, and I could make a whole other video on this, is where the characters make a decision, usually the protagonist makes a decision, that will propel the rest of the story. In this case, it's also a point of no return. You'll see this happen in movies, in TV shows, and in video games like this too. The character is going to make a decision that is irreversible and that propels them into the rest of the story. And this decision that they made at the end of Part 1 was to walk through the portal and defeat Destiny. They knew going in that if they did this, they would make irreversible changes. And at the end of Part 1, they succeed. They may not realize what they have done, because there's also the theory and the evidence that suggests that Sephiroth, even though he appears to have been defeated at the end of Part 1, got what he wanted to. He got what he wanted, but also he was toying with the party to make them think that they thwarted him. By letting the party think that he's been defeated, he can now set into motion the events that he wants to set into motion and get the party to think that what they think is thwarting him is actually playing right into his hand, just like, you know, the great mastermind villain in any number of movies or video games does. It's like, haha, you were doing exactly what I wanted the whole time. So at the end of Part 2, we've had this victory at the end of Part 1, which means at the end of Part 2 there's going to be a reversal. And this comes from story writing. Part 2 is going to end in tragedy. There's going to be some kind of death at the end of Part 2 that is going to partially be the catalyst that keeps us glued to YouTube and theory crafting until Part 3 gets made. You've got to remember that they probably want us to do the same thing at the end of Part 2 as we're doing right now with Part 1. Part 2 is going to be a tragedy. I think Part 2 could also see the two timelines converge, where Zack meets up with our primary party, the people that we are actually playing as, and someone's going to die. I'm thinking that perhaps this could be the moment where death comes for Zack, because we've got to remember Zack has cheated death now too, and death is coming for him. I think by the end of Part 2, and I could be completely wrong about this, Zack will have played his role of surviving, and his death and possibly the death of others could be the death of Biggs and Jesse, or whoever else has cheated death thus far. But their death is going to be one of the things that we talk about until part 3, for the 2 or 3 year gap between the making or the release of part 2 and the release of part 3. So we've been theory crafting for 1.5 years now on what's going to happen in part 2. They want us to do the same thing. And you know what? It's going to be a tragic death no matter what. Some fans are going to be upset no matter what. Some fans are going to love it. All the fans, I think, are going to be sad. But whether they love it from a strategic standpoint, in other words, oh, well, they killed this person off here, which means this and this can't happen, or, oh, this is just a cheap death. That's one thing I hope they avoid, is cheap deaths or fake deaths in part 2. I think the safety gloves are off now since Destiny has been defeated. We're not going to see fake deaths like we did in part 1. Like, Biggs surviving, Wedge surviving the plate collapse, and then being killed off somewhere else. But it's going to be a tragedy, and yeah, I'm theorizing it's going to be Zack or Aerith, and she won't be in part 3. Or if they really want to throw us for a loop, Tifa. That's it. I think we've talked about death for long enough. Let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment below of who you think is going to die by the end of part 2. Leave a comment if you think there is going to be a tragic death at the end of part 2, and part 2 is going to end in failure for our party. We're going to end on a sad note. It's going to be the Empire Strikes Back of Final Fantasy VII. So, thank you for watching. Hope you'll check out more of my Final Fantasy VII videos on the Filbert Express. We also do board games and other video games as well. We're doing Barotrauma playthroughs. We're really enjoying that game. It's on Steam, so you should check those out. I'll have another playthrough of Barotrauma coming up soon, and we'll have more Final Fantasy VII theory crafting and just more tidbits on Final Fantasy VII as well. So thanks for watching once again. Hope you'll boop the like button, and I'll check you next time.